You think the no-contact rule is a power move that automatically makes them miss you. But if you use it for the wrong reason, it won't save your dignity. It will expose how much of your identity you handed over. You think silence is always strength, but sometimes silence is wisdom, and sometimes silence is just passive hope wearing a mature face. Right now, you probably want a clean formula. Use no contact for this many days. Don't text, don't call, disappear, and somehow the other person wakes up in emotional panic, sees your value, and comes running back with clarity. That fantasy is seductive because it gives you the feeling of control when your heart feels powerless. It gives structure to your pain. It gives a plan to your confusion. It makes your suffering feel strategic. But here's what it really means, and you need to hear this like a grown man, not like a wounded child bargaining with reality. The no-contact rule is not a trick to control another person. It is a boundary that reveals reality. It is useful when contact keeps you trapped in confusion, disrespect, emotional addiction, or false hope. It backfires when you use silence as manipulation, when you disappear without clarity in situations that require communication, or when you call avoidance self-respect because you're too scared to face the truth. That's the whole game. Not how long you disappear, not whether they check your story, not whether they text first. The game is whether your silence is rooted in truth or fantasy. And if you need this kind of truth regularly, subscribe. Not because I need another subscriber, because you need reminders when emotion starts lying to you. You need something solid to come back to when loneliness starts making weakness sound noble and making confusion sound romantic. Subscribe if you want more clarity than comfort, because comfort will ruin you if it keeps you attached to what disrespects you. Now, let's get honest. Most people misunderstand the no-contact rule because they approach it with a hidden agenda. They say they're doing it to heal, but what they really mean is, I hope this makes them feel the loss. They say they're stepping back for peace, but what they really mean is, I hope my silence finally makes me valuable. They say they're choosing themselves, but behind closed doors, they're checking every notification, watching every view, reading into every little sign, and turning absence into performance. That is not healing. That is not discipline. That is not self-respect. That's called emotional leverage. That's called trying to pull a psychological lever because you don't know how to accept what reality already said. And yes, sometimes no contact does make someone miss you. Sometimes your absence does create clarity. Sometimes distance makes a person confront what your presence allowed them to take for granted. That can happen. But if that's your main reason for using it, you are still centered on them, their emotions, their reaction, their return, their realization, their regret, their timing, their attention, their choice, which means even in silence, they still own the center of your mind. That's the first hard truth. If your silence is still orbiting their response, you are not free, you are just quiet. And quiet is not the same as healed. You can go 30 days without texting and still be mentally kneeling. You can go 60 days without calling and still be emotionally begging. You can look disciplined on the outside and still be starving for validation on the inside. That's called behavioral distance without emotional separation. And that's why the no-contact rule helps some people and destroys others. For one man, it becomes the beginning of self-respect. For another, it becomes a countdown clock to disappointment. For one man, it cuts off chaos. For another, it feeds obsession, because every silent day becomes another investment in the fantasy that the ending will change. Same behavior, different motive, different outcome. So, when should you use it? You use no contact when communication is no longer producing clarity, respect, peace, or progress. You use it when every conversation drags you back into anxiety. You use it when you are being breadcrumbed, strung along, half-chosen, kept warm but not claimed, emotionally accessed but not emotionally valued. You use it when the dynamic is feeding your weakness, not your stability. You use it when the relationship is over, the breakup is real, and continued contact is just reopening the wound. You use it when they've made their position clear through action, and your continued presence is not love anymore. It's self-abandonment. But when does it backfire? It backfires when you use it instead of direct communication, where direct communication is required. It backfires when there is confusion that could be solved by one honest conversation and you choose disappearance because you want to feel powerful. It backfires when you apply breakup tactics inside an actual relationship instead of speaking like an adult. It backfires when you're dealing with a healthy person and you decide to punish them with silence because you got triggered, bruised, insecure, or emotionally flooded. It backfires when you refuse to say what needs to be said and then tell yourself that your withdrawal is wisdom. Sometimes silence is not strength. Sometimes silence is cowardice with good branding. That's called avoidance disguised as standards. And if you don't understand that distinction, you will misuse this rule. You'll start applying a recovery tool like it's a universal weapon. You'll use silence where truth is needed. You'll disappear where accountability is needed. You'll hide where courage is needed. Then when things get worse, you'll say the rule failed. No, the rule didn't fail. You failed to understand when it serves life and when it serves your fear. Now let's go deeper into why this happens, because the technique is never the real issue. The real issue is the wound underneath it. Why are you so desperate for a strategy in the first place? Because pain wants control. Rejection wants reversal. Uncertainty wants closure. And the no-contact rule feels like control when you have none. It gives your mind something to do with helplessness. It lets you believe you're still in the game. That's why men cling to it so hard. Not because it's always wise, but because it lets them avoid the blunt force of reality. If you're still doing no contact, then maybe the story is still alive. Maybe you're still in the middle, not the end. Maybe they're missing you right now. Maybe they're about to reach out. Maybe the silence is working. Maybe the fantasy still has a pulse. That's the root cause. You are not just attached to the person. You are attached to possibility. You are attached to the version of the story that protects your ego from finality. Because finality is brutal. Finality forces you to face what happened without editing. Finality forces you to admit that someone you loved, wanted, chased, or invested in did not choose you the way you wanted. Finality forces you to build a self that can survive without their validation. And a lot of people are not ready for that. So instead they use no contact like a spiritual waiting room, not moving on, not reconnecting, just suspended, frozen, emotionally parked outside another person's indecision. That's not strength, that's called self-delay. And self-delay has a price. It costs you time, it costs you focus, it costs you sleep, it costs you your appetite for life, it costs you momentum, it costs you your edge, it costs you the version of yourself that used to wake up with purpose before one person became your emotional climate. You stop training, you stop building, you stop reading, you stop leading, you stop laughing like yourself, you stop walking like yourself, you stop trusting yourself. You stop living in reality and start living in interpretation. You interpret the silence. You interpret the distance. You interpret the stories. You interpret the timing. You interpret the breadcrumbs. You interpret the gaps. You interpret everything except the one thing that matters most, the pattern. And the pattern is usually the truth, not the chemistry, not the potential, not the memories, not the one perfect night, not the apology, not the late-night vulnerability, not the temporary comeback, the pattern. Was there consistency? Was there clarity? Was there integrity? Was there peace? Was there mutual effort? Was there respect? Or were you surviving on moments, highs, mixed signals, little spikes of hope, and long valleys of confusion? Because if you were surviving on moments, then what you miss may not be love, It may be stimulation, it may be drama, it may be intermittent reinforcement, it may be the nervous system addiction that comes from never knowing where you stand and getting temporary relief every time the person reappears. That's called trauma bonding for some people. That's called emotional conditioning. That's called mistaking unpredictability for depth. And until you tell the truth about that, the no-contact rule won't just feel hard. It will feel unbearable. Because you're not only withdrawing from a person, you're withdrawing from a pattern your body became dependent on. The texts, the tension, the hope, the fear, the distance, the return, the uncertainty, the relief. That whole cycle trained you. So of course silence feels violent at first. Of course you want to check. Of course you want to break. Of course your mind starts manufacturing reasons to reach out. You're in withdrawal, not just heartbreak. This is why the rule is useful when used correctly. Because it doesn't just remove the person, it removes the stimulus. It gives your mind a chance to stop feeding on scraps. It gives your body a chance to calm down. It gives reality enough room to breathe so you can finally see what was actually happening instead of what you hoped was happening. Presence can hide the truth. Silence can reveal it. Presence can keep fantasy alive. Silence can starve it. Presence can let you confuse access with connection. Silence can show you whether the bond was real or whether you were just available. But again, only if silence is used honestly. If you're in no contact while secretly stalking, waiting, baiting, posting to provoke, rehearsing fake indifference, or counting the days like a prisoner waiting for release, then the silence is not cleansing you. It's feeding the same dependency in a quieter form. You didn't stop. You just changed the costume. Now let's talk clearly about when to use it and when not to, because vague advice is useless. If the relationship is over and continued communication keeps you emotionally hooked, use it. If someone told you they don't want the relationship, use it. If someone keeps giving you mixed signals and you're losing yourself trying to decode them, use it. If your nervous system gets wrecked every time they appear and disappear, use it. If they disrespect your boundaries and keep reaching for access without accountability, use it. If every interaction reopens hope but changes nothing real, use it. Use it to stop the bleeding. Use it to restore perspective. Use it to reclaim your center. Use it to cut the fantasy off at the source. But if you are in a real relationship with a real issue that deserves a real conversation, do not use no contact like a punishment. If you have not expressed your needs, your hurt, your limits, your expectations, do not skip honesty and jump to disappearance. If you're afraid of directness and you're hiding behind distance to avoid vulnerability, that is not self-respect. If you're dealing with a misunderstanding that mature communication could solve, talk first. If both people are willing but hurt, silence may backfire because now it turns repairable pain into preventable damage. Do you see the difference? No contact is not for controlling a healthy bond. It is for ending unhealthy access. It is not for making someone behave. It is for deciding what you will no longer participate in. It is not a substitute for courage. It is a consequence of clarity. That's the reframe. And once you get that, your whole posture changes. You stop asking, how do I do no contact so they come back? And start asking, what truth am I refusing to accept that makes silence feel necessary? You stop treating it like seduction and start treating it like surgery. Something clean, something firm, something done because poison needs to stop circulating. Now let's talk about the man who understands this, because you need an archetype. You need an image in your mind stronger than your current impulse. The man does not weaponize silence. He honors it. He doesn't disappear to create panic. He steps back because peace matters more than performance. He doesn't use no contact to teach lessons. He uses it to stop participating in lessons he should have learned already. He doesn't sit there posting coded messages, checking who viewed his story, watching for signs from the universe, pretending to move on while tracking every digital breadcrumb. He cuts the cord, then gets to work. He grieves, but he does not grovel. He feels it, but he does not feed it. He gets hit, but he does not stay down. He doesn't need to make a show of his healing because his routines start reflecting it. He trains, he reads, he works, he prays, he handles his responsibilities, he keeps his word, he returns to structure, he rebuilds his relationship with himself. The man is not cold, he is clear, he is not bitter, he is boundaried. He is not ego-driven. He is grounded. He does not confuse having feelings with having to obey them. He does not need constant closure because he understands that closure is often self-created. He stops asking confused people to explain why they are confusing. He stops asking inconsistent people for stability. He stops asking avoidant people for deep reassurance. He stops negotiating with patterns that already answered him. That's called self-respect. And the man also knows when not to use silence. He knows that if he's in a relationship worth protecting, he speaks calmly, clearly, directly. He says what the issue is. He says what he needs. He says what the boundary is. He gives reality a chance. He does not play games because he is not trying to feel powerful. He is trying to be honest. If repair is possible, he gives it the dignity of speech. If repair is not possible, then he withdraws with peace, not drama. That is maturity. Not disappearing every time your ego gets bruised. Not calling every trigger a red flag. Not running because closeness scares you. Maturity is knowing the difference between conflict and disrespect. between discomfort and danger, between repairable tension and corrosive chaos. Now get practical, because if this stays abstract, you'll turn it into entertainment and go right back to your bad habits. Do this. First, ask one ruthless question. Is continued contact producing clarity or confusion? Peace or anxiety? Movement or stagnation? Respect or emotional leakage? If the honest answer is confusion, anxiety, stagnation, and leakage, then stop romanticizing contact. It is not helping you. Do this next. If a direct conversation is needed, have it once. Cleanly, calmly, no essays, no manipulation, no over-explaining. Say what is true, say what you want, say what you will no longer accept. Then watch behavior, not promises, not emotion, behavior. If behavior stays the same, do not keep reopening the discussion just because the pain of detachment scares you. Then do this. If the relationship is done or the dynamic is toxic, cut access completely. Stop checking, stop circling back, stop lurking, stop asking mutual friends, stop reopening old chats and pretending it's just reflection, stop testing whether they still care, stop feeding the wound with tiny doses of poison and calling it harmless. Remove the stimulus. Then do this. Clean your environment, your room, your phone, your routines, your music if necessary, your digital pathways. Make your life harder to hijack. You don't need reminders in every corner. You don't need your nervous system ambushed every time you open an app. Protect your attention like it matters, because it does. Then do this. Move your body every day, not sometimes, every day. Lift weights, run, walk, sweat, stretch, breathe. Exhaust the chaos physically so it stops fermenting mentally. You are not just healing thoughts. You are regulating a body that got trained by uncertainty. Then do this. Rebuild structure fast. Wake up at the same time, eat properly, work with intention, limit dead space. Dead space is where fantasies breed. Idle time is where temptation gets loud. Structure is not punishment. Structure is scaffolding. It keeps you upright while the inside catches up. Then do this. Write the truth down, not the fantasy, the truth. What happened? What pattern repeated? What did you tolerate that you should not have tolerated? What signs did you minimize because you wanted the ending to go differently? What was actually said? What was actually done? Because loneliness is an editor. It will cut out the disrespect and leave you with highlights. You need a record from your sane mind. Then do this. Redirect your obsession into competence. Learn, earn, build, fix, train, create evidence that your life is expanding. Confidence does not return because you stare at the ceiling and repeat that you're enough. Confidence returns when your actions give you proof. Proof changes posture, proof changes energy, proof changes identity. Then do this. If they come back, do not abandon your intelligence in the name of chemistry. Slow down, listen, observe. Ask whether the pattern changed or the discomfort changed. Ask whether they are clear or just lonely. Ask whether they are accountable or just nostalgic. Ask whether they are consistent or just emotionally activated by your distance. One message means nothing. One apology means little. One emotional moment is not transformation. Change behavior over time. That's the standard. And if they don't come back, let that teach you something powerful. Not everything lost was meant to return. Not everything that leaves deserves retrieval. Sometimes silence doesn't lead to reunion. It leads to detox. It leads to freedom. It leads to the collapse of the fantasy you were too afraid to challenge while you still had access. That's a gift, even if it hurts. Because now you get to confront the deeper issue. Why were you so willing to stay available to someone who kept you uncertain? Why did inconsistency feel so magnetic? Why did you keep trying to prove your value where peace was absent? Why did their attention feel like oxygen? Why did their withdrawal feel like a verdict on your worth? That's the real work. Not counting days, not mastering tactics, not learning which text to send on day 31. The real work is healing the part of you that confuses being chosen with being enough. The real work is building a self-image that does not collapse when one person cannot see your value clearly. The real work is becoming the kind of man who can say, yes, I feel this deeply, and no, I will not let it make me weak in my standards. That is freedom. And let me tell you where no contact backfires hardest. It backfires when you are using it to avoid grief. Some of you are not actually healing, you are just hiding. You cut communication, but you never process the loss. You stay busy, stay loud, stay distracted, stay numb, stay joking, stay flirting, stay consuming, stay escaping, and then months later, the same pain hits you from the side because you never faced it. Silence is not magic. If you don't do the inner work, all you did was create distance, not growth. It also backfires when you use it with ego, when you want them to suffer, when you want to win the breakup, when you want your absence to punish, because now you're not reclaiming yourself, you're still tied to them through resentment, still centered on them, still measuring success by their emotional state. That's not power, that's dependency with a harder face. It backfires when you use it selectively. You cut contact for 3 days, then break. 7 days, then break. 10 days, then lurk. You keep reopening the wound, then wonder why it never closes. Pick a lane. If contact is bad for you, stop touching the stove to make sure it's still hot. It backfires when you label every discomfort as a reason to leave. You get challenged, corrected, misunderstood once, and now you want to disappear because modern culture taught you to worship ease. But all real intimacy has friction. All real connection requires communication. All real closeness reveals your wounds. If you use no contact every time you feel exposed, you are not protecting your peace. You are sabotaging your growth. That's called emotional fragility wearing the costume of standards. So understand the difference between boundaries and walls. A boundary tells the truth and protects what matters. A wall avoids truth and protects fear. A boundary says, this is what I will not continue participating in. A wall says, I'm disappearing before anything can challenge me. One is strength, the other is defense. And you need to know which one you're building, because the goal is not to become unreachable. The goal is to become unshakable. There's a difference. Unreachable men are often just wounded. Unshakable men are clear. Unreachable men hide. Unshakable men choose wisely. Unreachable men avoid vulnerability. Unshakable men don't give it cheaply, but they don't run from it either. So ask yourself again, am I using no contact to reclaim myself or to control what I cannot control? Am I stepping back because truth demands it, or because I'm hoping silence will do the talking I'm too afraid to do? Am I protecting my peace, or am I protecting my ego from rejection? Am I ending unhealthy access, or am I trying to trigger a response? Those questions matter more than the rule itself, because tools don't save you. Truth saves you. Rules don't save you, standards save you, time doesn't save you by itself. What you do with time saves you. And what should you do with time? Use it to build a life that does not collapse around one person. Use it to make your word mean something again. Use it to become physically stronger, mentally cleaner, spiritually steadier. Use it to correct the habits that made you emotionally available to chaos. Use it to study your own patterns with ruthless honesty. Use it to build self-trust so deep that you stop begging confused people for reassurance. That's when no contact becomes powerful. Not because it changes them, because it changes your relationship to yourself. You stop checking, you stop chasing, you stop explaining, you stop rehearsing, you stop fantasizing, you stop leaking energy into dead spaces, you stop turning every silence into a message. You stop making your self-worth wait outside someone else's door. And then something shifts. Quietly at first. You sleep a little better. You eat a little cleaner. You breathe without that same pressure in your chest. Music stops sounding like memory. You laugh and mean it. You complete a task without thinking of them every 10 minutes. You feel the old strength return to your posture, not because the pain vanished, because your center came back online. That is what the rule is supposed to do when it's used correctly, not make them panic. Make you sober. Sober from fantasy. Sober from mixed signals, sober from the addiction to maybe, sober from the belief that your value rises and falls with somebody else's attention. And when you get sober, you stop asking weak questions. You stop asking, how do I make them realize? And start asking, why did I stay where clarity was absent? You stop asking, what if they forget me? And start asking, why was I willing to forget myself? You stop asking, should I break no contact? And start asking, what part of me still wants to return to what made me unstable? That's growth. That's masculinity with depth. That's self-respect in action. Not loud, not dramatic, not performative, grounded. And if you are in a situation where no contact is not the move, be man enough to communicate. Say the thing. Ask the question. Set the boundary. Clarify the expectation. Stop trying to look emotionally invincible while your real life gets more fragile. Strength is not disappearing. Strength is discernment, knowing when to speak, knowing when to stop, knowing when to repair, knowing when to release. That's why the title matters. No contact explained, not worshipped, not demonized, explained, because it is a tool, a serious one, useful in the right hands, destructive in the wrong motive, healing when rooted in self-respect, harmful when rooted in ego, avoidance, or manipulation. So here is the final truth. Use no contact when contact is costing you your peace, your clarity, your dignity, your direction, your stability, your self-respect. Do not use it when what's needed is one honest conversation, one clear boundary, one direct expression of truth. Use it to end unhealthy access. Do not use it to play emotional chess. Use it when you are serious about reclaiming yourself. Do not use it when you are secretly hoping silence will do your emotional labor for you, because no tactic can save a man who refuses truth. And no heartbreak can destroy a man who returns to it. That's your power, not the silence itself, the truth underneath it. So if you're in the middle of this right now, stand up in your own life again. Stop staring at the phone like it contains your future. Stop waiting for one message to restore your identity. Stop romanticizing what made you unstable. Stop confusing chemistry with alignment. Stop giving sacred energy to temporary people. Clean your life up, tighten your routines, tell the truth, hold the line. Speak when speaking is right, walk when walking is right. And once you decide, stop wobbling. You do not need another loophole. You do not need another tactic. You do not need another excuse to keep your heart on hold. You need clarity. You need standards. You need self-command. You need to become the man who can feel deeply without surrendering his structure. That man exists. That man speaks directly. That man walks away cleanly. That man does not chase confusion. That man does not weaponize silence. That man does not beg for what should come with willingness. That man protects his peace without abandoning his honesty. That man grieves without collapsing. That man rebuilds without announcement. That man understands that losing access to the wrong dynamic is not failure. It is instruction. Become that man. And if the weak part of you still asks, but what if no contact makes them leave forever? Answer it with truth. If clarity, distance, and your absence are enough to make the wrong person disappear forever, then what you lost was access, not destiny. And if the right person is open to repair, honest conversation will tell you more than games ever will. Either way, truth wins. So stop treating silence like magic. Treat it like a mirror. Let it show you what you're attached to, what you fear, what you tolerate, what you still need to heal, and what kind of man you are becoming under pressure. Then use that information to rebuild something stronger than attraction, stronger than fantasy, stronger than hope without evidence. Build self-respect, build discipline, build purpose, build a life that doesn't beg, build a nervous system that doesn't confuse chaos for connection, build standards that don't fold the second loneliness shows up, because you are not waiting to be chosen. You are learning how to stop abandoning yourself. You are not one text away from peace. You are not one apology away from worth. You are not one reunion away from becoming whole. You are the answer. Your standards are the answer. Your truth is the answer. Your structure is the answer. Your willingness to face reality and still move forward is the answer. That is how you use no contact well. That is how you know when it backfires. That is how you reclaim your center. That is how you stop losing years to confusion. And if you want more truth like this, subscribe. Not for noise, for alignment, for the days your emotions get loud and your standards start whispering, for the moments you need a voice that drags you back to clarity before you betray yourself again. Stay around people who tell you the truth cleanly. Stay around messages that sharpen your judgment, not sedate your weakness. You're not the only one rebuilding. You're not the only one learning to choose truth over comfort. If that's the path you're on, then you belong here.